first time we go start with Mr. Josiah this time.
Whew, that's a lot to unpack there. What I will say is, what I'm going to talk specifically about something that I have a interest in. Really, is I see a gap in regards to Black male representation on college campuses. I say this all the time, even when I go out and do my professional speaking, and is that I'm 30 years old. I'll be 31 in July, so next month. I'm super excited. Um, I am. I've been to four elementary schools. I wasn't the best student. I went to four high schools as well, and two universities. I'm now working on my master's, and I've had one Black male teacher in my entire life. And that was 2 years ago. And that was intentionally because I was like, you're a Black man. What class are you teaching? That's the class I'm taking. And I grew up in the Bay Area, which most people would consider a pretty diverse place. So for me, I think that what one of the gaps that I see is our Black men being educated by white women and white men, white women in K through 6, and then white men from then forward. And to me, I think that's why we see such a huge difference in regards to the treatment of Black students, because we have so many of these people who come from different cultures who don't understand our culture and the way that they're communicating with our children. We are Black, and because everything that we've been through, not even just that, because of who we are, the way that we communicate is in our DNA. It's in our emotions, right? Like, we're not just gonna say something, but we're gonna make sure you feel it. You know what I mean? Like, you can even when we listen to music, you know what I'm saying? Like, the way that we choose to dance, you can feel that. And so when a person who doesn't come from that culture and wasn't raised in that type of environment chooses to educate, they get defensive. Because they're like, well, you're talking to me differently, right? I don't like the way you're talking to me. And so there was a report that came out back in 2018 in Sacramento, and they showed that our Black students were suspended almost 7 times more than our white students. And most of those suspensions were specifically from what's called willful defiance. What is willful defiance? That means that a teacher says, go sit down, and a student says, no, you're suspended. Get out of my classroom. I'm going to write you a suspension. And so because of that, because they're not familiar with how we operate, whereas to me, if I seen a kid and I say, hey, go sit down, they'd be like, no. I'd be like, for real, you're not going to sit down? That's how you feel? That's what we're doing today. We're not going to sit down. Okay, Mr. Greer, I'm going to go sit down now. You know what I mean? It's completely different. You know what I mean? Because again, I come from that environment, you know what I mean? Or maybe if the child's having a bad day, I'm going to say, yo, what's going on? Is everything okay? Let me sit down and talk to you. Like, is everything okay at home? Because I know that if a child is acting up, it's probably because something is going on somewhere elsewhere that they can't really explain. So I would have that conversation. But if you're not from that environment, if you're not from that area, then you tend to punish. So for me, I would say that one of the biggest gaps that I see in my profession is the lack of Black male representation. And I see how it's affecting our men moving forward.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I feel like I'm gonna have to get in here as a moderator. I want to share some things too, but I want to yield the floor to Ms. Rachel first to see if she had anything she wanted to share so far as gaps in education that she currently sees.
I do, but and I love conversation. So hopefully it's okay if I go off script and just even respond to what my brother Josiah said. Side note, happy almost birthday to you. But I just have to comment on what he just said first because it's so real. Prior to launching Foolery, I didn't mention earlier, but I have, over 10 years of experience in the higher education space, both on the admin side. I still teach as well. And to his point, I think in these 10 plus years, I think I maybe have two. I know two other brothers who are faculty members. And, in what you said, it just matters. That matters so much because, most people who are not being intentional about advancing their intercultural competency, they're operating from a vision of polarization and minimization, meaning that they're looking at cultures other than their own from a very from not only a biased but a much more harsh lens, and an unbalanced, an unbalanced harshness that they're looking at cultures different from their own, and then an unbalanced glorification, of their own, and even the well-meaning folks who are in that minimization mindset of saying, well, brother Josiah, when I see you, I don't even see you as a black man. Well, they don't realize that's what they probably say about their students. Well, I can't be, biased because I don't even see my black students as black students. Well, that's a problem because they are black. So you don't see them at all. And so his point was just so powerful. I had to yes and on that. And if I added another gap that I see in the education space, I would say it is hard to just choose one, but I'm going to say a focus on analytical thinking. And what I mean by that is my students, they care more about making sure they walk away with an A than really making sure that they are walking away with new knowledge, advanced knowledge that they can practically apply into their career. And I think that just matters because life doesn't operate like a calculator where you just type in, it's not always 1 + 1 = 2. Sometimes you gotta you have to think outside the box. And I just firmly believe that every individual has something just so unique to offer to their profession based on their unique perspective and all the things that help to shape the way that they think. But if since we're in a culture that I think kind of glorifies like sameness and just kind of in an education system that sometimes just wants to program you to only think, in this tunnel vision way, it takes away from that skill set, the critical and analytical thinking that really will help us to help us to solve, these big and complex problems like racial inequity, like homelessness, like poverty. And there is no cut and dry, simple way to teach on topics like that. So if I had to just choose one, because there's a lot of gaps, but if I had to just choose one, I'm going to say a focus and an appreciation for those folks who think out the box.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said, Mrs. Rachel. And you gave me a lot to chew on, and I will continue to process long beyond this conversation. I'm sure that is, hitting off on a lot of people's radar right now. I have some things that I wanted to share too, but I did want to yield the floor to Brother Devon Truvel if he has some things that he wants to share. I know we kind of operate in the same space of higher education right now, so we might have some similar thoughts, but did you want to hop in and share anything in particular?
I'm happy to hop in. I won't take up too much space, but my main thing, and I see the young king on here watching. How you doing, young king? Nakia said, how you doing? But my main thing is that finances, right? And to Rachel's point, I think we're not, the people who think outside the box aren't as valued as the people who do what the system tells you to do, check the boxes, do what's on the list, get the A. Those are, no disrespect to anyone on here, including myself, those are like the worker minds, right? When we think of the Ford system, the assembly line, if you can get an A, if you can do all the things on the checkbox, you're going to fit perfectly into this American system. But the people who are thinking outside the box, that's your people who are creating Apple, that's your Jeff Bezos, that's your LeBron James, that's your Oprah Winfrey's, that's your Tyler Perry's, the people who might not get the best grade, right? But their answer was completely different and gave you a different perspective. Those are the people that are going to be the entrepreneurs and solve the problems that we're still living in today, but we don't cultivate that. So completely agreed with what Miss Rachel was saying, but also the other side of it, I didn't learn about like startup capital, venture capital, what's an accurate budget, how do I build credit, how do I invest in real estate. None of that stuff was taught to me at all, K through 12, and only a little bit in college. And those are classes that you need to purposefully sign up for. In my opinion, America, we're a capitalist society, we're built on money, yet we never teach the people in our system about money. right? So that for me is the major gap is teaching people about finances, whether it's starting your own business or just the basics on, you know, budgeting, credit building, and how to build wealth in America.
Beautifully said, bro. Beautifully said. I'm going to move on to the next one, but I did want to share just a little bit about one of the biggest gaps that I think is doing damage to specifically Black students that have to go through the K-12 education system. In addition to what Brother Josiah was talking about, you know, the lack of representation by Black males and Black educators in general, right? Is the lack of representation in the curriculum, right? And so, you know, oftentimes in other cultures, there's you know, some type of supplemental education is happening so that they know what's, you know, part of their culture outside of what's being taught in classes. And, you know, just due to intentional deconstruction of our communities, you know, unfortunately, we don't have that in mass quantities right now. And what we're being taught in the classroom, K through 12, is usually from a deficit. You know, they only teach us about our history once we got here, not knowing about the fact that, you know, we really do come from royalty and we are the cradle of civilization in totality, right? But our students, you know, understanding and knowledge base around who they are and where they come from is oftentimes limited, right? You do have some special instances where their parents were able to do that due diligence and go back and get that knowledge and be able to impart it on them. But for a large part of their formal education, we're being taught about these white titans of America that built America and things like that. And that does something to you, you know, if you go through 12 years of that, you'll be programmed in a way that you're not even cognizant of, right? Into the indoctrination of white supremacy. And so I think that that is a gap that unfortunately I do not see being fulfilled by the K-12 system ever. And that's going to be, you know, critical to us as a Black community to really step in outside of the box and, you know, fill in those gaps for our students. But we'll rap more about that in a little bit. I'm gonna go to the next slide.